Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld. Greetings again and welcome to the Geek Homeworld. This is your host Ed, and this week Cheryl and I are talking to you from 1 hour in the future. At least that's how we decided to think about the American change over to daylight savings time this weekend.
Every year at this time, we move our clocks forward by 1 hour. Then in the fall, we move our clocks back an hour. This is an old observation that frankly doesn't make any sense in this age of electricity and electronics, but I guess we like weird traditions.
Yep, and the time officially changes early on Sunday morning. And one of my friends this week asked, why don't we just do this at 4 p.m. on Friday so we can get to 5 o'clock faster? And hey, I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's hilarious. We should definitely do that.
Since we are now officially time travelers living 1 hour in the future, we thought, which means I'd probably be late anyway. No,
You're still, yeah.
Regardless.
You're even more late now.
Exactly. But, well, we thought it would be fun to talk about time travel again on this episode.
On that topic, I saw an interesting meme on Facebook a few days ago, and on one side it has Marty McFly, who was, of course, played by Michael J. Fox in the Back to the Future trilogy, and on the meme he says, "I met my parents before I was born." Then on the other side there's a picture of River Song, played by Alex Kingston on Doctor Who, and she says, "That's cute, my parents named me for myself." And I thought that was really funny since I really love River Song. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that actually Marty's parents also named him for himself. Because you'll remember at the end of the first movie,
right,
his mother says to his father something like, "Marty, that's a nice name." And so if any of you out there are named for yourself, you're as cool as Marty and River, so good on ya.
That's a good way to be. Let's get back on topic. Each of us has selected one time-traveling movie we can each talk about. It should come as no surprise to anyone that Cheryl has selected something from the beloved Star Trek universe.
I chose one of my favorites, actually, from the Star Trek movie, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. And this is the one where they travel back in time to 1987 after they've rescued Spock from the Genesis planet. And really, actually, a lot of people are not fond of Star Trek IV because they feel like it's too much of an environmental hippie kind of message. Save the whales, save the world, blah, blah, blah. And they don't think that's, what you would expect from a Star Trek movie.
Very Star Trekian.
I think it's very Star Trek-y. I mean, Star Trek is all about making the world better, and they envision this world as a better place in Gene Roddenberry's imagination here. So I think it falls right in line with what Star Trek comes to represent. What I like best about it is that it really relies on the characters more than it relies on the typical
tech.
Star Trek tech. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In fact, they don't even have the Enterprise. They're flying a Klingon bird of prey.
I think that's because they probably wrecked it too many times, and the insurance company
well,
wouldn't give them another
they
one.
blew it up on purpose and
blow
stole
up the damn ship, Picard. No.
And they stole the Klingon bird of prey, and they get in trouble for that later. But they're okay. So they don't even have their own 23rd century tech when they go back to the 20th century.
Right.
And so some of the most interesting parts of the film, I think, is watching the familiar characters forced to interact with 20th century technology. And so, I think sometimes when we're thinking about time travel, we think about going into the future.
Right.
And, it's easy to imagine someone being baffled by the technology of the future. If you suddenly arrived 300 years from now, you would expect to have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
But I don't think we think about that in the reverse. And imagine if we went back 300 years, the world would still seem very strange to us. So if we went, even just 200 years back to 1816, we would find it really intolerable that slavery exists and that women and children are also the property of men. And, Darwinism and socialism and all those other isms have not yet been thought of. And actually the whole concept of modern democracy was still just an experiment then. And the French Revolution had just happened, and the Napoleonic Wars had seriously put the idea of democracy in question. It looked like a crazy idea. California was still part of Mexico, and antibiotics and water treatment and deodorant, for God's sake, didn't even exist.
You throw the bath water out with the baby.
Well, you wouldn't have to take a bath at all.
That's true.
Very rarely. And education wasn't a right. A huge part of the population couldn't even read or write. And in terms of technology, really electricity was just starting to be of interest, but nobody knew what to do with it.
And Zephyr Cochrane didn't make his first warp flight,
Well, that's still way in the future. And unless you were rich, you had to grow your own food. And you didn't have any pest control, or you could only use real actual poop for fertilizer that you probably gathered yourself from your pigs and your cows and your chickens. And I don't even want to think about what hygiene and healthcare were like back in those days. I mean,
they had none.
If the water didn't kill you, then the doctors would kill you by bleeding you or putting leeches on you, and that has to be
thank you.
that has to be like one of your worst nightmares.
Yes, it is.
Now you're probably going to not be able to sleep tonight thinking about leeches. I might put leeches on you.
I'm calling pest control in the morning.
I mean, even the King of England himself at this time was being systematically tortured by his doctors who were trying to cure his so-called madness. I mean, pavement didn't exist, much less GPS.
Oh my gosh.
Even maps were expensive. So if we went back to 1816, 200 years ago, we wouldn't be able to get ourselves from one place to another, much less feed ourselves. And something as simple as the flu could kill us. So I think the fact that Kirk and his crew managed to go back 3 centuries and navigate 1987 San Francisco, find food to eat, and avoid dying at the hands of the archaic doctors is actually pretty remarkable. Let's remember that they had never even used money before. How do you make change? They have no idea how to make change. They have to try to save the world of the future by using this, what would be really ancient technology to them. And so we see Scotty at his best trying to run a ship that he's not even familiar with the Klingon ship. And he goes into San Francisco to try to find the parts he needs in order to build a whale tank in the middle of the ship and to bring the whales into the future. And here we encounter one of those possible space-time paradoxes that people always talk about when we're imagining time travel, and that he gives the engineer at the plant the, I guess, chemical formula for clear aluminum, I think is what it is. And Dr. McCoy criticizes him, because you're not supposed to mess with the timeline. But Scotty says, how do we know he didn't invent the thing? So we keep that same humor that we enjoy with our Star Trek characters so much, especially, the original cast is very amusing, I think. And, one of the funniest things also is another Scotty scene where he tries to use the computer to put that formula in for the guy. And first he talks to the computer, and the computer doesn't respond. And so the 1987 guy hands him the mouse, and Scotty lifts it up like a microphone. And then ultimately the guy's like, why don't you just use the keyboard? And Scotty's like, wow, this is really old stuff. And then Dr. McCoy has the same kind of experience when he's at the hospital. They've gone to try to rescue Chekhov, who has been injured while he's trying to steal nuclear power because they don't have their warp technology, and they've got to somehow power this ship to get them back to the future.
Let's get that bird of prey up.
Exactly. So that's his encounter there, and the people on the ship that he's trying to steal the nuclear think he has a ray gun and all of that. And so when Bones, Dr. McCoy, gets to the hospital to try to save Chekhov, he sees this old lady who's waiting to do kidney dialysis, and he's horrified. He's like, what is this, the GD Spanish Inquisition, like some medieval torture,
the Dark Ages or something?
And so he gives her a pill, and later we see the old lady, and she's telling everybody, the doctor gave me a pill and I grew a new kidney.
I guess we're that simple.
I don't really know why he's carrying around kidney pills wherever he goes, but whatever.
Maybe they're kidney beans.
Maybe he's got like a whole jar. Ha ha ha. Okay. A whole jar, like he's got a kidney pill, a heart pill, like the whole anatomy in the jar. But, we never see him use that technology any other time.
You should always carry your anatomy in a jar, I guess.
carry your extra kidney in a jar.
Extra kidney.
Wherever
You never know when you need it.
And so, and then Sulu has his own experience with the technology of 1987 because he has to go find a way to transport everything back to the ship. And so he learns how to fly a helicopter, which he quite enjoys. This old-timey kind of experience. I guess like when a pilot from today goes and flies a biplane or something, that they find that really cool.
Or the Wright brothers plane if they were able to.
Yeah, it didn't fly for very long, I don't think. Yeah. So really the only 23rd century technology that we see them using is their communicator, which the 1987 scientist Jillian thinks is a pager. Do you remember pagers?
I do just barely remember pagers, yes.
And so once again, we see, as Star Trek has so often done, that their tech, and in this case, they're filming in 1987 a story that takes place in 1987. So contemporaneously, we've got that technology being contrasted with the technology of the imagined future of Star Trek. And so much, though, that we see, like the communicators, comes to be. Star Trek does a really good job of trying to be realistic about the direction technology might go. And so now today, we don't have pagers.
No.
We all have communicators.
We do.
Our mobile phones, and they do more than act as phones. In fact,
they're computers, handheld computers. They're
teenagers today don't even talk on their phones.
They're almost a version of the tricorder,
Right, it's like the tricorder meets the communicator, and actually they're working on that scanning technology in the tricorder now. So, it may be that we haven't quite gotten to those pills that help you grow a new kidney or kidney beans, but we do have communicators.
Yes, we do. Let's see. For my movie, I decided to focus on one of my favorite superhero franchises, the X-Men. And in X-Men Days of Future Past, we see Wolverine traveling back to the past via his consciousness to his younger body. And this
weird.
I know, very weird, very weird. It's very trippy, like in the movie.
Yeah, and totally could happen.
Could happen.
Trippy. If you drop enough acid.
Yeah.
This is the 70s.
Because that's what Xavier says to him when he comes out of the little consciousness thing when they're going after Mystique and all that. He's trying to kill Trask. And he's like, you just took some bad acid. And all that. So, it takes place in the 70s. Days of Future Past, and Wolverine enlists the help of a young Quicksilver, which stole the movie.
Yes.
When he did the time in the
Quicksilver's my favorite part, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And Hank McCoy, better known as Beast, and they're trying to free Magneto, who's being held inside the
a plastic
prison inside of
where there's
the
no
Pentagon.
metal that he can manipulate.
And they're basically trying. The whole thing is to fight off this horrible future, and they go back and forth in time in that movie a lot. It's constant time travel, but even in the X-Men comic universe, they always use time travel as a storytelling device, and I'm especially looking forward to X-Men Apocalypse, which is coming out later this year, which is the ultimate test of the X-Men and the completion of the Bryan Singer X-Men trilogy that he started with X-Men First Class, and it's going to be awesome because you're going to see time travel and from the movie Deadpool, that at the end scene, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Deadpool, I can't imagine why you hadn't, but I
haven't seen it.
You haven't? Oh gosh. Well,
I haven't seen it.
Well, you're going to travel back into the future and the past and forget this.
And watch it.
But he talks. Okay, well, let me just say he has a moment at the end of the movie that's very reminiscent of an 80s movie. You can spoil it,
I don't care.
Okay. There's a Ferris Bueller's...
Spoiler alert. You forget to say spoiler alert.
I said that. So he has this... Why are you still here? a Ferris Bueller's Day Off ending to the movie, and he goes, "Oh yeah, by the way, Cable's going to be in the next Deadpool movie, and Cable's the time traveling son of Scott." And we talked about that before, and I'm excited about that. But
well, you know, you
comics,
mentioned Bryan Singer too. That this film essentially erases some of the previous films.
It erases some of it. It gets rid of the third X-Men movie that when he left the franchise.
Stinker, yeah,
which I didn't mind it so much, but you know, it was the whole Dark Phoenix saga basically, and it brought some of the loose ends together, and it did very well.
And then we use that same kind of idea with Star Trek, with the reboot of Star Trek in the new films to kind of erase the previous timeline so we can use the young Kirk and Spock and McCoy characters and not be beholden to the past that already exists in the Star Trek universe.
They made, in Star Trek and J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, they kind of made it an alternate timeline that's also, interesting enough, beholden a little bit to the original. So it's kind of both, actually.
It starts in one place. Yeah. It starts in the same. Yeah, so I mean, it's those multiverse realities that we talked about in a previous episode.
In the X-Men comics, they always use that time travel. You have Bishop, who's time travel. He's also in Days of Future Past, and then now we're going to eventually see Cable, who is a big fighter against Apocalypse, you know, and so I'm hoping he'll appear somehow in X-Men Apocalypse. But he's one of my favorite time traveling mutants. Cable is, and we also see this following exchange. I'm just going to read a little dialogue here that's one of the key components about time travel, and this is Hank McCoy, a.k.a. Beast. Yeah, and he's talking about changing the timeline. Hank McCoy, there's a theory in quantum physics that time is immutable. It's like a river. You can throw a pebble in and create a ripple, but the current always corrects itself. No matter what you do, the river just keeps flowing in the same direction. Then Wolverine says, "What are you trying to say?" Beast says, "Well, what I'm saying is, what if the war is inevitable? Mm-hmm. What if she," when they're talking about
Mystique, right?
Yes. What if she is meant to kill Trask? What if this is simply who she is? And then Professor X says, just because someone stumbles and loses their way doesn't mean that they're lost forever. And he says, "No, I don't believe that theory, Hank. And I cannot believe that is who Mystique really is." And he said, "Ready to plane. We're going to Washington."
Well, but it is who she is. I mean, and this is, you know, I hate to go back to Doctor Who. Actually, I don't hate to go back to Doctor Who, but Doctor Who says, you know, time is always changing. That time is very mutable. Except
it's
for
changeable.
Then he says, well, there are fixed points in time.
And he's a Time Lord,
change.
so he should know.
He should know. There are fixed points you can't change. One of those is his own death, which he does change. So I guess even that's not. That's changeable too.
There's possibility realities and different Earth 1s, Earth 2s. There are so many, you know, we talked about before. There's alternate timelines, that parallel universes. They're all possible.
Yeah. You know, so it's a lot of fun to think about. But what I would say to any of you who are going to be time traveling anytime soon, make sure you pack appropriately. While you may not know what you need to take into the future, there's no way you can pack too much for the past. I mean, I recommend you get your immunization shots up to date. You get a flu shot. You probably want to bring some toilet paper with you, soap.
And snacks. You should definitely bring snacks because you never know when you're going to get hungry.
Yeah, you are going to get hungry, and you probably don't want to have to kill your own food.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.